She was a jagged piece of high-end biological hardware, discarded in the dirt like a used clip. The wind on Xylos 9 didn't just blow, it was a pressurized blast of liquid nitrogen and industrial-grade malice. It shrieked against the landscape, driving ice needles through my tactical gear with a persistence that felt personal. I was Jake Morrison, maintenance grunt, glorified janitor for the outer colony machines, and professional hider from things with too many teeth. I was dragging my carcass toward a base station that kept receding into the whiteout, a bad joke played by a broken HUD. Then my boot connected with something that wasn't rock. It was a silver-black mass, half buried in a drift, looking less like a person and more like a tactical disaster waiting to happen. Silent, heavy, and cooling fast. My heart started kick-drumming against my ribs like a junkie looking for a fix. I dropped into a combat crouch, clearing the frost from what turned out to be 7 feet of apex predator. For like carbon fiber weave and muscle that looked built for high-impact homicide. She wasn't human. Not even close. Her chest was laboring with the heavy, hydraulic rhythm of a failing pump. The sheer wrongness of her being here, like this, hit me in the gut. There was a jagged, wet tear in her side, the blood freezing into dark rubies against the permafrost. Leaving her was the smart move, the survival of the fittest move. Taking her meant dragging a death sentence into my living room. I cursed, the sound flattened by the gale, and wrapped her in a thermal blanket that felt as flimsy as a corporate promise. A low, grinding sound, the kind of noise a dying Gitrain makes, rumbled out of her muzzle. Her eyes stayed shut, blue slits of frozen sapphire. The drag back was a slow-motion suicide mission, my lungs screaming under the strain of her massive weight. When I finally breached the airlock of my survival pod, the silence felt like a physical weight. The place smelled of ozone, old grease, and my own fear sweat. I sealed the hatch, listening to the heater struggle against the Xylos 9 winter. I looked at her, a beautiful, terrifying glitch in my routine existence. I patched her up with the same detached precision I used on a busted excavator, suture gun, high-grade narcotics, and enough stimulants to jumpstart a tank. Then I sat in the corner with a piece of scrap pipe, watching the monster breathe. The clock ticked down in the stale air. Suddenly, her eyes snapped open, 2 high-output blue LEDs burning with an ancient, predatory focus. She sat up, limbs unfolding with a fluid, terrifying economy of motion. A growl vibrated through the floorboards. "Easy," I said, holding my hands up in the universal sign for "please don't rip my head off. I'm the one who patched the hole in your side." She blinked, the murder in her eyes replaced by something colder, more analytical. "Vok'kar," she rasped. The word sounded like it had been dragged through a gravel pit. "You saved me. You are mine now." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my skull. "I'm a mechanic, lady. I don't belong to anyone." She didn't buy it. "I am Varkas," she said, her voice a low-frequency threat. "My name is Kaelith." I shook my head, trying to eject from the conversation. "Kaelith. Great. Look, I just didn't want to find a corpse on my doorstep. That's it." She sniffed the air, her snout twitching as she mapped my scent, my pheromones, my panic. "Doesn't matter. You're marked." The word felt like a target painted on my back. Before I could ask for a translation, she redlined, the blood loss caught up and she slammed back onto the floorboards. I stood there, pulse racing a mile a minute. I was just a grunt in a dead-end sector, but I knew when the stakes had just been tripled. Outside, the storm was erasing my tracks, but inside, the air was getting heavy with the smell of an impending firefight. A tremor that had nothing to do with the cold rattled my nervous system. I watched her, a silver-black mountain of lethal potential occupying my floor space. I'd just invited a high-level security breach into my life, and the walls were starting to feel like a cage. "What the hell have I done?" I whispered. Far out in the whiteout, a red light began to pulse, a rhythmic, mechanical eye tracking a signal. A beacon. The hunters were on the scent, and they weren't the type to knock. The red eye kept blinking, a patient, digital countdown. I sat there like a statue, my mind a mess of tactical variables. Kaelith. The name tasted like cold steel. She'd called me Vok'kar, a term that felt less like a title and more like a leash. I didn't know much about the Varkas beyond the horror stories shared over cheap synthale at the colony bar, but I knew I was in over my head. I'd crossed a line, traded my anonymity for a seat at a table where the buy-in was blood. I moved back to her, my movements jerky and caffeinated. Her fur was a mess of gore and matted silver. I checked my wrist unit. Her biometrics were a chaotic, non-linear mess of alien evolution. I prepped a stim shot meant for high-G pilots, a cocktail of adrenaline and neural accelerants. It was a coin toss, either she'd wake up or her heart would detonate. I slammed the needle into her thigh. Her body arched, a violent spasm of pure muscle, then settled into a deep, heavy rhythm. The meds were doing their job, keeping her in the game. When she opened her eyes again, the fog was gone. They were sharp, scanning me like a tactical HUD. "You touched me," she said, the words a low, rhythmic challenge. "I'm the reason you're still breathing," I snapped back, my voice sounding thin even to me. Kaelith's mouth curled into something that might have been a smile if it wasn't so full of teeth. "Yes. Twice. You've made a choice, Morrison. There's no undoing this. Not in this life." I backed away until I hit the cold bulk of the airlock. I just did the decent thing. She tilted her head, watching me like a hawk watches a field mouse. "The Varkas don't have a word for decent. We have bound and we have dead." "Explain the bound part," I demanded. She leaned in, her musk hitting me like a physical wave, ozone and wild, raw pheromones. "You are my Vok'kar. The Zenith isn't a handshake, it's a biological lock. Marrow to marrow." She laid out the lore of the sanguine eclipse, a ritual of sacrifice and bonding that sounded like something out of a bad neurosim. I was no longer just a mechanic, I was a vital organ in a body I didn't recognize. "The sanguine eclipse?" I asked, feeling the world tilt. She pointed at the viewport, where the sky was turning the color of a fresh bruise. "Xylos 9 is a slaughterhouse. When the sky bleeds, the bond is forged in the dirt." I looked at my hands, expecting to see grease, but feeling only the weight of an ancient contract. "So I'm a pet?" Her eyes flashed with an amusement that felt like a knife edge. "You don't even know you're marked yet. You will." Before I could move, she lunged. Her snout pressed against my neck, a flash of heat, then a sharp, localized sting. I yelled, shoving her back. "What the hell?" Kaelith watched me, her tail flicking with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. "The Zenith-Seal. You're mine, and I'm yours. Until one of us stops breathing." I rubbed my neck, the skin throbbing with a rhythmic heat that felt like a second pulse. "I fix machines, Kaelith. I don't sign onto blood cults." She looked at me with a pity that felt like a slap. "This isn't a cult, Jake. It's biology. And it's the only thing that's going to keep you alive." The weight of it hit me, a heavy, leaden shroud of reality. "I didn't ask for this." Kaelith turned to the window, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Doesn't matter. They're coming. The Iron Talon. They're tracking my biosignature, and now they've got yours. You're a beacon in the dark." I felt the blood drain from my extremities. "Why? I'm nobody." She turned, her silhouette cutting through the dim light. "You touched a daughter of the Obsidian-Shard. I was promised to a warlord, a piece of meat named Malika. By saving me, you stole his property. In his world, you're a thief, and thieves get dismantled." "This is a bad sim," I whispered. Kaelith didn't offer a hug. She grabbed a jagged piece of hull plating and started binding it to her forearm with industrial tape. "We fight." I looked at my toolkit. A soldering iron and a wrench. "No. We run. There's a subsurface cave system south of here. If we get deep enough, the interference might mask our signatures." Kaelith grabbed my collar, her claws snagging the fabric. "I won't lead a corpse. If you want to keep your skin, keep up." She kicked the door open, and the Xylos 9 winter roared in like a riot. I grabbed my pack, my heart a frantic, messy rhythm in the silence of the storm. I followed her into the whiteout, a small, desperate man following a silver-black ghost into a legend I wasn't ready for. Behind us, the tracker beacon was chirping faster. The hunters were close. We moved through the skeletal remains of a petrified forest, our shadows jumping and stretching under a bruised moon. The trees were like frozen ribs, clicking together in the wind. Kaelith was a blur of silver-black grace, I was a mess of heavy breathing and slipping boots. The 3 red dots on my rear scan were closing the gap, professional killers with better tech and zero mercy. "How far?" she barked. "Half a click." I yelled back, my lungs feeling like they were full of broken glass. "Terrain drops ahead." She didn't slow down. She grabbed my hand, a grip like a vice wrapped in fur, and hauled me toward a massive, lichen-covered monolith. Beneath the roots of a dead tree was a black maw. "Down," she ordered. "Into the guts of the planet." The tunnel was a claustrophobic, wet nightmare. I crawled through the freezing muck, my breath echoing off the stone walls. The air smelled of wet earth and ancient decay. Above us, the muffled rhythm of heavy boots hit the snow, the Iron Talon, right on our heels. We kept moving until the passage opened up into a cavern that felt like a cathedral built by a madman. The walls were covered in Varkas script, jagged claw marks that looked like they were bleeding light. Bones were everywhere, the white, picked-clean remains of God knows what. "A tomb," I whispered. Kaelith perched on a rock, her eyes the only light in the dark. "A sanctuary. To them, we're already dead." I sat down, my head spinning. "Tell me about them, Kaelith. The real story." She told me about the Obsidian-Shard, about Malika's appetite for power, and a marriage that was basically a merger of 2 violent corporations. "You ran from a wedding?" I said, a jagged laugh escaping me. Her face stayed stone. "I ran from a life as a broodmare for a psychopath. My blood has value, Morrison. By saving me, you crashed the market." I touched the mark on my neck. It was humming now, a violet pulse that felt like a low-voltage shock. "And now I'm the debt collector's target." "You're the Zenith," she corrected. She talked about the old myths, about humans who didn't just fix machines, but commanded the stars. About tech buried in the ice that was waiting for a specific genetic key. I laughed, a hollow sound. "I'm a mechanic, Kaelith. I do maintenance, not miracles." She stepped close, her breath hot on my skin. "When you touched the pod's console, it didn't just boot up. It sang. Only the old blood makes the metal sing." I looked at my grease-stained hands. "You think I'm some kind of lost heir?" Kaelith's smile was a terrifying display of high-tensile teeth. "I think the Talon believes it. And they don't like competition from the archives." I stood up, gripping my pipe like it was a high-frequency blade. "So I'm being hunted by wolves because of a genealogy report." A low, bass-heavy growl rolled through the tunnel. We both froze. Shadows started creeping across the floor, long, jagged shapes that didn't belong to us. "They are in," Kaelith whispered, her blade arm clicking into place. "Stay behind me, Vok'kar." 3 Varkas hunters stepped out of the dark, their armor looking like black beetle shells under a red light. One stepped forward, eyes glowing like hot coals. "Kaelith," he hissed, the sound like steam from a broken valve. "You've defiled the line with this sack of meat." Kaelith stood her ground, fur bristling. "I've found the blood of the architects." "You're chasing a ghost, tracker." The hunter laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "We'll take his heart and your head." I felt a sudden heat surge in my chest, a vibration that started in my marrow and moved out. The symbols on the walls started to bleed light. The air turned heavy with static. The hunters backed off as the script flared into a blinding violet, throwing long, distorted shadows. "He's waking it," one of them yelled, sounding genuinely rattled. I stared at the wall, my hand moving on its own, pulled by a thread I couldn't see. The stone felt warm, like a living thing hidden under the frost. Kaelith was right there, a lethal silver-black shadow. "He's not a man," she shouted. "He's your obsolescence." She hit the trackers like a high-velocity projectile. The fight was a mess of wet sounds, roars, and the smell of hot blood. When it was over, 2 of them were scrap on the floor and the third had vanished back into the tunnel. I stared at her, my chest heaving. "You didn't have to do that." She looked at me, her eyes mirroring the dying glow of the stone. "We're in the blood now, Jake. The hunt has just changed directions." Morning hit Xylos 9 like a hangover. I sat at the cave entrance, watching the yellow light wash over the ice. I felt like a man who had been uploaded into a different reality, one where I wasn't just a mechanic, but a pivot point for a planetary war. The wall, the mark, the violence, it was a heavy load to carry. Behind me, Kaelith was a shadow moving through the ruins. The script, it's the language of the void, she murmured. I walked over to the wall, my fingers hovering over a symbol that looked like a stylized, weeping eye. It looks like my people's tech, I said. Kaelith nodded. Humans built the silence. We just moved into the ruins. I touched the stone. A panel slid back with a metallic groan. Inside was a device of polished silver and shifting, non-Euclidean geometry. What is it? I whispered. Kaelith backed off, ears pinned back. Not my world. I took the thing. It was heavy, vibrating with a frequency I felt in my teeth. A voice, cold and digital, filled the cave. Blood code accepted. Prime sequence engaged. I almost dropped the thing. It spoke English. Aegis Initiative online. Last Void Guardian detected. Kaelith's eyes were wide. It knows you. The device projected a holographic map, a shimmering line through the mountains. Companion identified, the AI continued. Bonded Varkas Alpha. Connection verified. It's talking about us, Kaelith said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The map led to the core of the Obsidian-Shard, her home, her executioner's block. I looked at her. Is that where the answers are? She nodded. And where Malachar is? I took a breath of freezing air. Then let's go finish this. The hike was a long-distance exercise in suffering. The device floated between us like a mechanical ghost, guiding us through ice canyons and over ridges that tried to kill us. Kaelith talked about the old days, the humans arriving in HFY ships, the fall, the betrayal, and the long winter that had turned her people into predators. They were gods, she said. I looked at my bleeding knuckles. I'm no god, Kaelith. She stopped, her eyes boring into mine. Gods don't feel it. They just carry the weight. You're carrying it, aren't you? I looked at the floating device. Maybe they just forgot us. By sunset, we were on a ridge overlooking a forest that pulsed with its own bioluminescence. In the center was the core, a fortress of bone and crystal that looked like a jagged tooth aimed at the sky. It was throbbing with violet light. I felt a tug in my marrow. Tomorrow, Kaelith said. We camped in a hollow. The silence was thick. You afraid of that place? I asked. Kaelith stared into the fire. I'm afraid of who I was. I'm afraid of who I have to be to survive it. She looked at me. And you? Afraid of your ghosts? I looked at the dark. I'm just afraid of not being enough for you. You're the Zenith, she said, moving closer until her fur brushed my arm. At first, it was the mark. Now, it's just the man. My heart skipped a beat. You said this was biology. She didn't say a word, she just leaned her head against my shoulder, her warmth the only thing keeping the cold at bay. We hit the core at dawn. The gates were massive arches of ivory, carved with centuries of slaughter. As we stepped inside, the device flared white. The walls woke up, lighting up like a circuit board. A voice boomed from the shadows, heavy and old. So, the human has come to claim his debt. An elder Varkas, white-furred and ancient, stepped out. Arch-Hierophant Thurin. Thurin looked at me like I was a piece of interesting trash. You bring the cursed blood to the source, he growled. Do you have any idea what you're waking, boy? Kaelith stepped up, hand on her hilt. His finding the truth, Thurin. The truth you buried. Thurin led us into a hall of pillars. Warriors emerged from the dark, watching me with hungry eyes. The core remembers the humans, Thurin said. It remembers the fire. He stopped at an altar draped in black silk. 2 millennia ago, your kind broke the world, Thurin said. They tried to play God. They burned. He pulled the silk back to reveal a crystal blade. This was the Void Voice. The last human who held this started the war that ended everything. He looked at me. Touch it. Let's see if you're a king or just another corpse. My hand shook as I grabbed the hilt. The world exploded. A psychic scream ripped through my head, memories of stars dying and civilizations burning. The Varkas hit the deck, covering their eyes. The blade was humming with enough power to level a city. "It's true," Furin whispered, sounding terrified. "The blood is back." Kaelith looked at me, her face lit by the blade's fire. "Here's the void voice. The winter is over." But the party was crashed. A roar shook the building, followed by the sound of tearing metal. "Iron Talon," someone yelled. "Malika!" Malika burst in like a wrecking ball. He was a mountain of iron plates and sheer hate, his armor painted in fresh blood. He locked onto Kaelith, then me. "You," he hissed. "You stole my property." I raised the crystal blade. "She was never a piece of gear, Malika." The fight was a high-speed collision. Malika was all brute force, but the blade was doing the thinking for me, whispering tactical angles and kinetic paths. Kaelith was a silver-black blur at my side, taking out his guards with surgical precision. Malika pinned me against the wall, his fangs inches from my jugular. "You're a ghost, human. Ghosts belong in the dirt." I looked him in the eye and felt a cold, sharp calm. "Then let's go together." I dumped every ounce of energy into the blade. A blinding white blast threw him across the hall. He didn't get up. The core went quiet. I stood over him, the blade still singing in my hand. Kaelith walked over, her hand on my neck. "It's done," she whispered. Furin stepped up, bowing low. "The Zenith is real. The human has returned." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt empty, filled with a memory that wasn't mine. "What now?" I asked. Furin led us to a dais where the device was waiting. "The message," he said. "The last word." The device projected a hologram of a man, Commander Rodriguez. He looked like me, but older, tired. "If you're seeing this, my blood survived," he said. "You aren't a king, son. You're a bridge. Choose, the fire or the light." I looked at Kaelith, then the Varkas. I saw the fear and the hope. "I choose the light," I said. The core responded, the violet turning to a warm gold that bled out into the forest. The following weeks were a mess of politics and rebuilding. We united the clans, drafted the Zenith Accord, a promise that we wouldn't let the fire take us again. Humans started coming down from the orbit, looking at the world with new eyes. One night, I sat on the balcony, watching the twin suns go down. Kaelith sat with me, her fur glowing in the light. "Thinking about the stars?" she asked. I shook my head. "Thinking about here. Home." I pulled out a ring, a band of silver I'd hammered out of Malika's armor. "In my world, we give this to the ones we choose. Not the ones we're bound to. The ones we choose." I held it out. "I accept your Zenith, Morrison," she whispered. She took the ring, sliding it over a claw, and leaned her forehead against mine. The stars above stayed steady. The winter was over. The morning was finally here.